Dennis.
Hey, John, it's Dennis from the Australian Rock Show. How are you?
I'm doing great, sir. I'm doing great.
Great to get you on the phone today. And the reason is, of course, Raven's upcoming tour down under with Girls' School and Venom Inc. Now, I noted in your bio that visiting Australia was on your bucket list, so it'll be good to check that off, mate.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been trying to do this for about 15 years at this point. So it's finally come together and couldn't be happier. We will be touring for about 3 weeks beforehand as well. So we should be match fit and raring to go.
Mate, we kick off every show with a song, and on this one we open with the anthemic track called Take Control. Heavy metal at its purest, lifted off Raven's 83 album All For One. Do you recall the writing and recording process on that song, Take Control?
I think we wrote it. We used to rehearse in the weirdest places somehow, and I cannot remember how. We got the rehearsal halls for the Northern Sinfonia Orchestra, which was this huge, very posh, bleached wood, floors, the full 9 yards. Because I just found some tapes the other day, which were rehearsal tapes from there. And Mark just had that riff, and it was just instant. And I remember the recording, because Michael Wagener was using weird tricks. We did a guitar track, and then he went to the tape machine and just nudged it a little bit slower, a tiny bit, and do it again. It was like a natural chorus thing. Just made the guitar sound gigantic. And we still play the song. It's especially if we're doing like 2 nights in the same place, we'll alternate, and that'll usually be one of the openers. Or if we're doing like we did in Japan, they wanted a show which was more of the older stuff, one of them, and we opened to a Take Control. It's such a great opener. It just sets the scene and gets us going.
Listen, I do want to start by asking you a question about your earliest days with your brother Mark. It's a special relationship which you and he have, and a love of rock and roll has obviously been the glue that has bonded the two of you together your whole lives. I guess when and where did that all start? I mean, were you both swapping Slade records or watching Top of the Pops together? I mean, where did that rock and roll journey begin?
Oh, we were definitely doing that. It was the Top of the Pops, the Friday rock show. There was a rock show on a Saturday. And we were just taking it all in. And, you'd have those crazy weekends where your mum and dad were out, so the record player would be cranked to 11 and you'd be jumping around with a tennis racket, And we just took it to the next level and just said, let's actually form a band. And it was a case of we didn't know anyone that had formed a band where we were at all. There was actually kids at school going, you can't do that. That's not allowed. Where did you get permission to do that? That kind of crap. That's one of the reasons eventually why we came up with our own sound and everything, because we had to do it the hard way. Our education was going to the Newcastle City Hall or going to the Mayfair Ballroom and watching bands, So we learned the hard way and did it our own way. We basically went on holiday to Spain when we were, 14 or something. So it had to be around about 71, 72. And Mark got an acoustic guitar. And from then on in, we were both borrowing it or fighting over it, and bothered our parents in 74 finally to get electrics for Christmas, which they got us cheap electric guitars and said, we'll get you started, but then you're on your own.
Well, I guess as a side reference, and it is my small attempt at humour that I might point out to younger listeners, that there was in fact a UK outfit containing, quote unquote, the Gallagher brothers long before Manchester gave us Noel and Liam. So there you go.
Absolutely.
John, I do want to ask you about the iconic band logo, if I can. From memory, it didn't appear on the first 7-inch Don't Need Your Money, but an early version does grace the cover of the next single, which was 81's Hard Ride. What is the story behind the iconic Raven logo? Did someone from Neat Records design that?
No, I did it. I came up with it. We needed a logo. Rob there's some early photos. You can see this bizarre bird-looking thing, like like the V is the body of the bird, and the R and the N is like a wing. And I wasn't too fond of that. And we'd had this thing which was just like Gothic script floating around. So when we did the single, we just used that, like the army stencil version. And we were just looking for something. And I was, looking at logos like Judas Priest and the Iron Maiden one, and said, well, I like the straight lines. Let's see if we come up. Says the letters in Ravenwood Lane to straight line. There's really no curves. Let's see what we can come up with. And I added the flash, and everyone loved it. And there you go. It went from there.
Mate, I just mentioned the second single, Hard Ride. What was the thinking to include a re-recorded version of that on 1985's Stay Hard, simply to reach a larger audience via the major label, folks who may not have heard the original?
it was major label stupidity as usual. They decided they wanted the song, and of course when Michael was there, he goes, "Oh, that bit goes on too long, cut that bit down." It was a more homogenized, safer version, which I'm not particularly fond of. The record came out well overall, the album, but I'm not a big fan of that version of Hard Ride. I can't say I've listened to it in 30 years at this point.
Well, I guess history shows, that the albums the band released on Atlantic were not as well received by hardcore or traditional Raven fans. But in the mid-'80s, I absolutely love those records. On and On still sounds killer, as does Speed of the Reflex, which is an amazing tune. And I think it's testament to the quality of the songwriting that those songs have endured.
Absolutely. I mean, the only thing I'm not particularly enamored with is the Pack Is Back album, just because of the circumstances and the pressures that were on. And there was weird things that Rob turned around right before we were recording. Oh, I'm going to do it to a click track. I don't want you guys playing because it gets in the way. And it was like, what? And immediately, because he's a typical English drummer who plays a little bit behind the beat, it just took all the push and pull out, because of course my brother's racing to the finish line, and that's a lot of the feel is that push and pull, and so that was gone. And then of course the songs had a very commercial bent and were played that way, and there's always been a lot of commerciality and a lot of hooks in everything we've done, but it's usually tempered by the mania and the chaos and the craziness and the energy. So when you lean the table too far one way, it's going to fall over, and that's kind of what happened. There's a couple of good songs on there, but there's a couple of songs that got ruined, and there's some that have got really horrible, embarrassing lyrics. And we took stock after that and said, it's like we built this beautiful sailboat that Atlantic didn't want to put one penny behind. They wouldn't even give us money for a video. And we said, well, this is pointless. I'd rather sink on our own merit rather than, doing somebody else's approach. So we said, bugger that. And we did the Mad EP, which we were much happier with. And then we did Life's a Bitch, which was a great record. But of course, Life's a Bitch is basically a huge fuck you to Atlantic. So.
I guess, you get asked maybe about producers during interviews, so I'm just going to hit you with one as well. So you've worked with a few producers over the years. I guess, most notably Michael Wagener, who you mentioned before on All For One, and Eddie Kramer 3 years later on The Pack Is Back. How do you look back on the contributions those guys made to those records?
Well, Michael, we love. We've worked with Michael many times, and he's just a hell of a lot of fun. He's not your stereotypical German by any means. He's hilarious, and he's just so intuitive, and he has such a great knack for just getting great performances. I've always had a great time doing vocals with Michael. He's just the right guy to just, what about try this, try that, and just brings the best out of you. And the guitars, he's a master of getting great guitar sounds. So we've always had fun with that. And we learned so much doing All For One. I mean, we'd learned a lot from Steve Thompson when we did our first album. The second album was basically all ourselves, and we just knew we needed guidance. We needed to learn a bit more. So we brought Michael in, and you know, they weren't huge things, but the things he said when we were writing, you know, we did pre-production for the first time. Songs like Run Silent, Run Deep. Why don't you put the vocals here instead of there? Oh, that's a great idea. And, you know, put this bit out here and maybe do this here. And it just made that record pop. It just made it, you know, made it work. Eddie Kramer, loved Eddie Kramer, everything he'd done. And it was crazy because Eddie Kramer's the kind of guy that it's like, let's go live. Let's go live in the studio. Let's capture that moment. And we had them basically trying to be Mutt Lange. You know, let's clinically do this part 4 million times until it's absolutely perfect. Not his forte and not our forte. So that's why that was kind of doomed. But we had a hell of a time in the studio with him. I don't think we ever laughed so hard. Especially one day when Mark decided to imitate all the guitarists that Eddie had ever worked with.
Wow.
So he did this 10-minute pastiche of, you know, playing Jimmy Page with the guitar down at his ankles and making all these crazy Hendrix noises. And oh, it was just ridiculous. He had Kramer on the floor crying.
John, the song we're going to close out with today is one which is very appropriate, Thunder Down Under, lifted off Raven's 2015 album, Extermination. Those lyrics I absolutely love. Spotlight pirate of the rhythm and blues with a wink and a story. He'd always pull you in, telling you about Rosie and the City of Sin. I think it's one of the best ever tributes penned for Bon Scott. Just wonderful. Had you crossed paths with Bon and AC/DC back in the day?
Yeah, once. They were doing the Highway to Hell tour, and they were playing the Newcastle Mayfair on a 2-night stint. And the first night was cancelled because there was a fire in the venue. And they put it out, and they were able to do the second show. And I have no idea why we were there, but because it wasn't a thing we did. But we were back in the back of the back street where the load-in was, and met Bon, Malcolm, and Angus, and talked to them for a few minutes, and they were really friendly and just, you know, great guys. And I actually got their autographs. I have them floating around somewhere. And it's literally the only time I ever got an autograph off anybody, I think. Pretty crazy. I was just amazed at how small they were. But what a band. Yeah, we loved AC/DC. They're incredible. And funnily enough, even though Brian's from our hometown, I never saw AC/DC with Brian. It was always, I saw them 3 times with Bon. And they just used to blow the roof off that place every time.
Now, 3 years ago, mate, you covered the Status Quo tune, Is There a Better Way, on your Party Killers LP. Would I be correct in assuming that Alan Lancaster was one of your influences? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, I mean, I literally influenced by all those players back then. Yeah, Alan Lancaster, you listen to Free with Andy Fraser, Gary Thane with Uriah Heep, John Wetton with Uriah Heep, Trevor Bolder with Uriah Heep had a lot of good bass players. You know, Greg Lake, Chris Squire. I took, you know, like a sponge. I took from all of them. But Alan always had some great little lines in those, you know, like you listen to the live album, you just go up the neck there and pop a couple of things out. The Quo were just, they were the only band you could really approximate they were like was like AC/DC, where the crowd and the band were as one. They would just start and the place would go mental. I saw them in '74 and it was like just incredible.
I've always thought Raven would do a rip and take of something like Big Fat Mama. Agreed? Or am I delusional?
We did.
You did? I haven't heard that.
Yeah. It's an extra track on the, which album is it? One for All. Not All for One, One for All. from the year to like 1999, 2000. Yeah, we did it. It is out there.
I'll have to track that one down.
And we did that with Michael. And it was Michael's studio at the time was on the grounds of Wolf Hoffman's house. And Wolf was in, and Wolf was so pissed off that he was out of town, because we said, we would have got you to play on this with us. And he was so pissed off that he didn't get to do that. Because he's a huge Status Quo fan. We never knew that. Yeah.
Now, in the early 90s, you had a short stint playing out with Paul Di'Anno from memory. I think there was a live album which resulted. How did that all come about, and what was it like, I guess, to be part of another live outfit after more than a decade, with Mark in Raven?
Well, it was a session. I never joined any band. What happened was a friend of mine was managing Paul, and they were going to do showcases in New York in order to get a record deal for Paul. And the strange thing is they did showcases playing Battlezone, which was Paul's band previous, and Iron Maiden material, and pretended it was new material, basically, and brought so it was a rehearsal hall with a stage, and they brought record company people in to try and get a deal. So we rehearsed for about a week, and then we played for about a week with people coming in. And the last day, they brought in a recording truck, and we recorded live to 2-track all the songs, and they put it out as live in South America, when in fact it was recorded at 547 West 27th Street, Manhattan. They added the worst crowd noise you will ever hear to it, but it's a good album. Yeah, the playing's real. There's nothing fake on it other than the crowd. It's great. So I got well paid for it, and that was it. I had no intentions of going any further forward with anything other than that. They just caught me at a good time because we'd just come off a long tour, which was the Architect of Fear tour, I believe. And that was that. But I'm still friends with Cliff, who's in Tank now. Great guy who was playing guitar on that.
Mate, I know you get asked about the connection with Metallica a lot, but looking back, was there any inkling at all, I guess, that you saw in them which would indicate that they'd go on to be superstars? Or were they just another bunch of young heavy metal kids, swilling beer and blasting out the tunes?
Oh, very much so. That's all they were. It was, I mean, they were like a sponge, but they watched, they learned a lot from us. They learned a lot from a lot of other people. And of course, there's a huge change from their first album to their second album, which really established who they wanted to be and what they were, rather than just, heads down, meet you at the end. They showed a lot more craft and a lot more creativity. And to the point where there's people that go, oh, they sold out on the second album, which is freaking ridiculous, of course. But no, they have a chemistry where they've got a visionary guy like Lars, who gets slagged off for his musical ability, which is kind of by the by, because he's obviously a genius as far as it comes to plotting and looking forward and basically just annoying everyone to get what he wanted.
It's good stuff. John, thank you for your time today. We better wind up. Raven, along with the Mighty Girls School and Venom Inc., hit Australia next month. Thursday, 27th of June at the Zoo in Brisbane, Friday the 28th of June at the Manning Bar in Sydney, and Saturday the 29th of June at the Croxton Band Room in Melbourne. It's one hell of a triple bill. 3 iconic British bands and one evening which is not to be missed. A true English triple crown. Like the way I did that?
Very nice, very nice.
Now, before you,
I believe we're doing a solo show on the 30th somewhere in Sydney as well. So watch out for that.
Before you exit, every guest on our show gets to choose a song by an Australian band. What would you like to choose and why?
Oh, well, this Men at Work song. I'm taking the piss. What song are we going to play? It's got to be AC/DC. There's no way around it. Down Payment Blues.
Awesome. Why have you chosen that one?
There's just something about that song that just, And the funny thing is, the more I listen to it, the more I think, boy, Malcolm was listening to Street Fighting Man by the Rolling Stones. They're almost the same chords, but played just different enough to give it its own life. It's just, to me, one of the quintessential AC/DC. Just a killer riff, and the lyrics are hilarious. They're brilliant.
Thank you for your time today, John. Look forward to seeing you on tour.
Yes, sir. See you soon.